Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have former State Senator Scott Howell and former Speaker of the House Greg Hughes. Gentlemen, glad to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
You bet. Let's get right into the first topic, that being this idea of a national divorce. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, throwing that out there on President's Day, a split between red and blue states. Scott, let's start with you. What do you think of that?
Well, what I think, and I can't say it any better, what our great Senator Romney said, and I want to quote this exactly. Mitt Romney says Marjorie Taylor Greene's call for a national divorce is insanity and attention-seeking. And, you know, for me personally, I think back to the Confederacy, what happened in the Civil War. I think about creating more of a divided nation. I think about tribalism. And I don't want that to happen. I remember one time when Texas was trying to succeed from the Union. There was a real legislative intent on that. And I was at an NCSL meeting, and some of those people who were supporting that tried to convince me that, yeah, but Texas, we're big enough, we can do this, we can sustain ourselves. I just think it's a bad idea in motion. And, you know, who's going to refute Senator Mitt Romney?
Well, maybe Greg Hughes.
Well, the only thing I'd say is, look, Scott's been a public servant. He's served as minority leader in the Senate, state Senate. I've been in the state House. We both know that there's common ground that can be found, even if we see the world differently. There is a way to problem solve as lawmakers. But what I am astounded at is there's a lot of attention given to what Marjorie Taylor Greene said, the Congresswoman. But this division, you could find yourself on a domestic terror list if you didn't agree with the Biden administration. There was no room for not wanting to see children chemically castrated or boys playing girls' sports. But if you had that position, the left would say that you were morally bankrupt, that there was something wrong with you in terms of your morals. There was no debate. So what I would say is, let's not just, I mean, we can look there and we can say that there's no national divorce that ought to happen, but it's a two-way street. I think that it is healthy to have debate. It is healthy to disagree if you're doing it to problem solve. But I just think that all I ever hear is one side really criticizing when a right of center person says something like this, but I think you can find it across the board, and I think it's regrettable.
And I think Greg really touches on something very important in that conversation. We have got to learn to collaborate. We have to learn to be able to listen, because Greg points out a lot of good points on that. But, you know, I've thought a lot about that since it's happened. I know people in downtown Salt Lake would like to succeed from the state. But it's the far, far left. It is not reasonable. It doesn't represent what I say is the good Republican that wants to collaborate. And when Greg was the Speaker of the House, I can tell you he brought people together. He brought people in. They sat down and they went through these different items. And so I don't have any trouble with what the Speaker is saying in terms of how far the left has gone, because that would be like saying, well, let's succeed New York out of this, or Massachusetts, or California. Yeah. It's just not the right thing to do.
Okay, let's move on to House Bill 393 that did advance in a House committee. Representative Jordan Tusher is sponsoring that bill. It would essentially set the standard that if you get, as a candidate, 70% at convention, that's it. You are the nominee. There would be no primary. Obviously, there are implications when it comes to the signature path on this. Greg, let's start with you on this one. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
So I like the bill a lot, and I'll tell you why. If you get the signatures and it qualifies you for the ballot, if there's a 70% prospect where in a high information cycle like a caucus convention cycle, a candidate, if they receive that 70%, could eliminate the signature gathering candidate, well, I think the signature gathering candidate would be well served to engage in that high information election cycle of a caucus convention and talk to delegates and talk about those issues, with the goal of hopefully only needing 30% plus one. I think 70% is a very high bar for a candidate to get in a convention. I know that in my elections and my primaries that were contested, I did not get 70%, and I worked my guts out. So I think what that bill would do is it would encourage everyone in a primary, if they got signatures, to still engage at a high level in a convention cycle, and I see nothing wrong with that. Plus, history's shown since we've had our convention, our signature gathering, any candidate that ever did get 70% in a convention was not defeated by a signature gathering candidate in a primary. So I don't think there's any history to say that there's something that you're interrupting anything that's not already happening.
Scott, that is a pretty resounding benchmark, but some people look at this and say it's just another step at chipping away at the signature process.
Well, there's no doubt in anyone's mind, and especially if you talk to former Governor Mike Leavitt, he would say that right off the top. And as a Democrat, we kind of like it. We kind of like to see them having a little challenge in there. We just wish we could get more candidates to run, that we could get close to 40% if we did something in that. But I think it's something that's internal to the Republican Party. Look, they've got, just like we have, they've got extremists on this side. They have moderates. They have probably some that are just a little left of center. And it's gone on for so long, I can't even believe that there's still bills up there. Greg does make a really good point, though. That 70% is a huge number. And that pretty much defines, I think, anybody who could be elected to that position. But there's no doubt about it. I'm sure Kurt Bramble just every day is pulling his hair out, trying to figure out what do I have to fight now?
All right, let's move on to taxes. We've been hearing a lot about cuts, a lot of proposals on the table, up on the Hill as we enter into the final week. First off, let's establish the question, should we be looking at tax cuts, or should we be looking at investing that into other social programs instead? Greg, your thoughts?
It's not an either-or prospect. I think you'll see that the state's revenue, the economy's done well. Taxpayers have sent a lot of money to the state capitol. Budgets have grown, and I think issues are being addressed, priorities are being identified. So I think that happens. The tax cuts, I will tell you, I'd take all the above. I think that there is room to create tax relief, whether it's not taxing your Social Security, tax relief on our food, income tax. I think there's enough revenue that I'm looking at in terms of those numbers where you could provide more money, supply side, more money in homes, as you're seeing our inflation and groceries getting more expensive and everything getting more expensive. Leaving more money in people's pockets and families' pockets, you're never going to go wrong when you do that. And I wouldn't pick favorites on my tax cuts. I think there's enough that you could do it strategically to address a lot of needs there. And your budgets are still, in Utah, growing in terms of some of those critical priorities.
Mm-hmm. A lot of advocates saying, look, we have programs that could really use the money. Scott, your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I agree with the speaker that it could be a mix of sales tax on food, income tax. The older I get, the more I like on Social Security. But what I have problems with in this bill is it's kind of being held hostage to our state constitution that said there's a direct line of funding back into education. And it's on the sales tax, what's happened up there, we'll reduce sales tax on food if you let us have a constitutional amendment to take that money that's been allocated for so many years to public education. That's the part that I have a hard time with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but let me just
real
point
quick,
yeah.
Greg, that was a complaint with HB 215 as well, the one that provides the scholarship for private schools and homeschooling, is that you're taking this one issue and those opposed to it say you're holding it hostage to get something else in. Is that what's happening?
It's not. And so if you go to that bill, that last year when they had it different, when you had the funding for schools, public schools in a different bill, and then you had the school choice bill, they said, look, they hate public schools. Look, they're leaving them behind. They don't care. They want to dismantle it. They put that together to show the commitment of kids going to school, public education, giving those kids choices, those families choices. On the tax issue, it's an interesting one. General fund is your sales tax. It funds government. Income tax funds primarily public education and higher ed. Well, we don't print money as a state. If you want to narrow your general fund tax base, but you don't want to touch the earmarked income tax, that makes it a much, much harder issue. And again, the state doesn't print money like the federal government does. I think they are connected. I think that if you give the lawmakers, the people we send to the legislature, the ability to prioritize the needs, and I think in there it says that there'll always be an inflation growth to education, and they'll always fund growth. I think there's some provisions in there to make sure education is not harmed. But it is being leveling with the voters, saying, look, they are connected. You can't print money.
Yeah,
if you're going to take one from there, you got to give a full breadth of
the voters income. Would have to approve that ultimately. Scott, you have the last 30 seconds.
Oh, well, thank you very much. This silver hair doesn't come from just being born yesterday. And when I served in the Senate, I have to tell you, this same issue came up time and time and time and time and time again. my good friend, Senator Howard Stevenson, and I debated this in depth, and there's two different philosophies. I believe that we should keep that money earmarked for the greatest things that we need in our state, to our greatest assets, that's our children. And so Greg and I see it in different lights. We don't disagree about giving some money back, but this has been chipping away for a long time, and it gave me a lot of silver hair.
All right. Well, I started getting silver hair in high school, so
Well, you look great.
You're an old soul, that's all.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time. Appreciate your insight. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for the invite.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah.